Bunny did not just end a world tour in Puerto Rico. He walked back into the place that still cannot keep the lights on, and decided the only honest way to close the biggest run of his life was to fill the stage with the exact people who once let him stand on it when he had nothing. The opening night of his Cerramos en Casa shows, and the whole place seemed to hold its breath, as if the air itself knew this was no ordinary homecoming. The man who had just finished a world tour that turned stadiums into temporary empires decided to end it right where the story first took shape, and he did it by calling in names that carried the weight of his early years. What started as a list of guests quickly revealed itself as something more calculated, a sequence of arrivals that felt less like random surprises and more like pieces of a larger plan unfolding under the Puerto Rican sky. He opened the evening by bringing out the young band Chewy to handle their part on Huertita from the very album that gave the tour its name. The group had already traveled the globe with him, yet seeing them take the stage first at San Juan carried a quiet message that Bad Bunny still chooses who gets the early spotlight when the night belongs to him alone. Right after that, Day arrived, riding in a Jeep to deliver his verse on Verdad, the vehicle cutting through the stadium like a rolling reminder that movement never stops, even when the power grid fails. These opening moves set a tone that makes celebration with something sharper, as if every entrance had been timed to keep the crowd guessing what would come next. Then, the real shift happened when Bad Bunny reached back nearly a decade and pulled out Diles, the song that first pushed his name beyond the island. The track had featured Arcángel, Ñengo Flow, Farruko, and Ozuna, and on this night, 3 of those voices walked out while the 4th stayed away. Arcángel, Ñengo Flow, and Farruko stood beside him, and the stadium erupted with a sound that felt like recognition mixed with relief. Bad Bunny did not just run through the song, he paused the music long enough to look at the men next to him and declare that he still held enough material with them to fill an entire separate concert. He called them legends without a hint of distance, and then made the moment personal by reminding the audience that 10 years earlier, these same artists had opened doors when his path was still uncertain. He pointed to Farruko and recalled that the first time he ever stood on a major stage at the Choliseo was during one of Farruko's own shows. He credited Arcángel with pulling a younger version of himself under a protective wing when the industry still looked closed. He named Ñengo Flow a true island legend who had also extended a hand at the right time. He sent respect across the distance to Ozuna, the missing voice from the original lineup, and then thanked the early label Hear This Music, along with DJ Luyan and Mambo Kings for the foundation they helped pour. The speech could have stayed in the realm of polite nostalgia, yet Bad Bunny kept speaking until he reached the only thank you that seemed to carry real gravity. He turned toward the thousands packed into the stands and said his greatest respect and love belonged to Puerto Rico itself, because without the island, none of the rest would have been possible. He repeated the names of the 3 men standing with him: Ñengo Flow, Real G for Life, Arcángel, La Maravilla, and Farruko, and the crowd answered with a roar that mixed gratitude with something closer to defiance. The night continued with Arcángel remaining on stage for older work. They moved through Tu No Vive Así from 2016 and later La Jumpa from 2022, 2 tracks that bookended different chapters of the same rise. Watching them trade lines felt less like a guest appearance and more like a private conversation the rest of the world was allowed to overhear for a few minutes. Near the end of the show, another figure stepped forward. Bad Bunny's longtime partner, Gabriela Berlingueri, who took the chorus of Lo Que Le Pasó a Hawaii. The choice landed with quiet force. After a night filled with reggaeton veterans and career milestones, the final guest was the person who'd shared the private side of the journey. Puerto Rico also received 2 exclusive performances that no other city on the entire tour heard. Bad Bunny reached into Ser Bichote from his 2018 debut album X Sign Pray and Vuelve Candy B
from the 2023 project Nadie Sabe Lo Que Va a Pasar Mañana. These songs belonged only to the home crowd, a deliberate decision that underscored how carefully he had planned the final nights. Yet the music kept sharing space with a different kind of message. Midway through the evening, Bad Bunny stepped away from the hits and addressed the water shortages and daily power cuts that continue to shape life across the island. He told the audience he could not bring water to the people who lacked it, and he could not restore electricity to the homes that lose power every day. What he could offer, he said, was a little joy, a reminder of pride and the strength to keep defending the land. He went further. He described the ongoing chaos as something created on purpose, a pressure designed to exhaust people until they leave so that the island can be sold piece by piece until it becomes a Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans. The words landed with the weight of someone who has watched the same problems repeat for years, while his own success grew larger. The speech mixed hope with accusation, and the crowd answered with chants that rejected certain development projects and called for change at higher levels of government. In that moment, the concert stopped feeling like a victory lap and started looking like a calculated public statement delivered under the cover of celebration. The guests themselves seemed to serve a double purpose. Bringing out the veterans of Diles connected Bad Bunny's present fame to the exact people who once risked their own platforms on an unproven artist. It also quietly reminded everyone that the industry that once needed those older names now orbits around the man who started as their junior collaborator. The Jeep arrival of Agelda TV in the presence of Chunky signaled that Bad Bunny still elevates newer voices from the island, even while he honors the past. Gabriela Berlingueri's appearance added a private note that no outsider could fully read. Taken together, the guest list looked less random than strategic, a living timeline of how one artist moved from the margins of Puerto Rican music to a position where he can summon its past and its future onto the same stage. The exclusive songs for Puerto Rico only sharpened the sense that the entire night had been designed as a closed circle, a private conversation between Bad Bunny and the place that made him. Outside the stadium, the same problems he named continued. Water rationing schedules still forced families to plan their days around limited supply. Power outages still arrived without warning. Critics argued that a stadium full of joy did nothing to fix the pipes or the grid. Supporters answered that the real value of the night was the refusal to pretend everything was fine. Bad Bunny himself seemed to understand the tension. He never claimed the concert would solve the crises. He only claimed the right to stand in front of his people and say the crises were not accidents. The suspicion that followed the speech was inevitable. If the chaos is created on purpose, then the question becomes who benefits from an exhausted population in an island increasingly marketed to outsiders. The timing of the final shows, announced late and sold out in hours to local cardholders first, only added to the feeling that every detail had been weighed. The record-breaking demand for the tour worldwide had already proven that Bad Bunny could fill any venue he chose. Choosing to close at home while the island struggled with basic services turned the music into a mirror. The guests became part of that mirror. Each one carried a piece of the story that began when a young Benito needed someone to say his name into a microphone. Watching them stand beside him again 10 years later made the success look both inevitable and fragile at the same time. Success on that scale always invites questions about what it costs the place that produced it. Bad Bunny has spent years turning that tension into lyrics and stagecraft. On the first night of Cerramos en Casa, he turned it into a guest list in a speech that refused to stay polite. The night did not end with answers. It ended with a stadium full of people who had been told their joy was itself a form of resistance. Whether that resistance changes anything beyond the 2 hours of the show remains an open question that the music alone cannot close. What the night did prove is that Bad Bunny still decides who gets to share the stage when the story comes full circle, and he still decides what words get spoken when the lights are brightest. The guests he brought out were not decoration. They were evidence of a career that never fully left the island, even when the rest of the world claimed him. If you were still watching this far into the video, and the questions about what really happened that night are starting to feel personal, hit the subscribe button right now so you do not miss the next breakdown of the moments that keep rewriting the rules of Latin music. The second night would bring its own list of names and its own messages, but night one already delivered a complete statement. Bad Bunny closed the circle with the same people who once helped him open it, and then he used the platform they helped build to say the island itself is still under pressure. The sarcasm that sits under the entire evening is hard to miss once the music fades. A global star returns home, summons the legends who made his early records possible, gives the crowd 2 exclusive songs no other city received, and then tells them he cannot fix their water or their power, but he can give them joy. The seriousness of the crises never disappeared. The speech simply placed the crises inside a concert and dared the audience to hold both feelings at once. The twist that the night quietly delivered is that the most important guest was never any of the artists who walked on stage. The most important guest was the crowd that filled the stadium while the rest of the island dealt with empty taps and dark rooms. Bad Bunny kept saying he needed them more than they needed him. The guest list, the exclusive tracks, the political words, and the final thank you to Puerto Rico all circled back to the same idea. The career that conquered the world still belongs to the place that first believed in it, and the man at the center of that career is still willing to risk the party atmosphere in order to name the things that refuse to improve. Whether the naming changes anything is a question the concert left hanging in the humid San Juan air. The guests answered the nostalgia, the speech answered the present. The silence that followed both is what the audience carried home. Subscribe if you want the full picture of how one night of music managed to feel like both a celebration and a warning at the same time. And stay until the end, because the real weight of the story only settles after the last note fades. Bad Bunny did not simply bring out a list of collaborators, he brought out the living proof that his story and the island's story remain impossible to separate, even when the infrastructure fails and the power keeps cutting out. The first night of Cerramos en Casa turned a stadium into a temporary proof of that bond, and the guests he chose made sure nobody could pretend the bond was only about entertainment. The suspicion that something larger is being managed on the island will not disappear because a concert happened. The joy he offered will not fill empty reservoirs. Yet the decision to speak the hard words in front of tens of thousands of people while the legends of an earlier era stood beside him remains one of the clearest statements Bad Bunny has made about where his attention still lives. The night focused on him from the first note to the last, and every guest only sharpened that focus. Chewy and Davey showed the present generation still finds space next to him. Arcángel, Ñengo Flow, and Farruko showed the past still answers when he calls. Gabriela Berlinguet showed the private life still walks onto the public stage when he decides it should. The exclusive songs showed Puerto Rico still receives gifts no other stop receives. The speech about water and power showed the man who can sell out the world still measures his success against the daily struggles of the place that raised him. Put all of those pieces together, and the guest list stops looking like a surprise and starts looking like a deliberate architecture. Bad Bunny built the night the same way he has built the career, by controlling the narrative and then inviting only the voices that fit the chapter he wants to write. The chapter he wrote on night one was about return, debt, pride, and unfinished business. The guests with a punctuation, the speech was the final sentence. Everything else was atmosphere. The stadium held it all for a few hours and then released it back into an island that still waits for water and light. That is the real story the first night of Cerramos en Casa left behind, and it is a story that keeps unfolding long after the last guest leaves the stage. If this deep look into the choices Bad Bunny made that night has held your attention this long, make sure you are subscribed so the next chapter reaches you the moment it drops. And thank you for staying with the full picture until the very end. The man at the center of it all never pretended the night would solve the problems he named. He only insisted that the problems deserved to be named in the same space where the music lived. The guests he brought out made that insistence harder to ignore because they carried the history of how one artist rose while the island around him kept facing the same old shortages. The jeep that carried Davy, the stage that held Arcángel and the others, the private moment with Gabriela Berlingueri, and the exclusive tracks that belonged only to Puerto Rico, all served the same purpose. They kept the focus locked on Bad Bunny and on the place that still claims him, even after the rest of the world learned his name. The suspicion that hangs over the crises, the deliberate feeling of the guest list, and the quiet twist that the real power in the room belonged to the people who showed up despite the dark rooms and dry taps, all combined into a night that refuses to stay simple. Bad Bunny knew exactly what he was doing when he called those names and when he spoke those words. The first night of Cerramos en Casa was never just about the music. It was about the man who decided the music would carry a message the island could not ignore, and the guests he chose made sure the message arrived with the full weight of the past behind it.